Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Fridays with Vistage webinar. Before we begin, I'd like to go over a few items to help you participate in today's webinar. If you are experiencing technical difficulties joining the webinar session, please dial support at 888-259-8414. When you join today's webinar, you selected to join either by phone call or computer audio. If for any reason you'd like to change your selection, you can do so by accessing your audio pane in your control panel. During the presentation, all participants will be in listen-only mode. You will have the opportunity to submit text questions to today's presenter by typing your questions into the questions pane of the control panel. You may send in your questions at any time. We will collect these and address them during the Q&A session at the end of today's presentation. I would now like to turn the webinar over to today's moderator, Dave Nelson.
Welcome, Vistage members and any guests who are with us to the Fridays with Vistage webinar. I'm Dave Nelson. I'm a 14-year Vistage member, CE676 in Pittsburgh, and your webinar host. Today we're talking about revving your growth engine in the high gear. Our guest today is Mary Doise, partner and CMO at Chief Outsiders. Hey, Mary, welcome to Fridays with Vistage.
Thank you, Dave. Glad to be here.
So let's give just a little bit of a bio. Mary has helped grow small to medium-sized and Fortune 500 businesses across a variety of domains, including human capital, CRM, customer relationship management, and education technology. Mary ran a $40 million P&L business for Sage Software, a major $2 billion software solutions firm where she was the VP and GM of their Human Resource Management Solutions division. She turned a declining, mature business into a growth engine with 15% year-over-year growth through divestiture, acquisition, new product development, effective marketing, and alliances. Mary deployed a vast multi-million-dollar international solution for a $17 billion technology company and led a branding initiative for a $130 million education technology firm. So these are some of the experiences she brings to bear. She brought these three companies, in fact, together under one master brand. If you've got a question today, please type it in the questions box in the GoToWebinar control panel. You might have to click that little triangle to open it up. We'll answer as many as we can, but at the end of the presentation. So Mary, tell us about revving your growth engine into high gear.
Thank you, Dave. Really appreciate that introduction. And for those of you who don't know, Chief Outsiders is a firm of CMOs that works across the nation, and we offer fractional CMO services for small to mid-sized businesses, helping them to grow. The whole presentation today is based on the Growth Gears, which is a book written by Art Saxby, the CEO of Chief Outsiders, and Pete Hayes, a CMO and principal within the firm. A lot of these principles are very basic in nature, but when you put them all together, it makes a lot of sense, and it really does help you to grow. I've seen it work over and over again with our clients. So with that, I'd like to move forward into our content today, starting with this quote by Peter Drucker, who we all know has a lot to do with our management principles of today. And Peter has said very wisely, luck never built a business. Prosperity and growth come only to the business that systematically finds and exploits its potential. I think that really sets the stage for what we're going to cover today. And with that, I'm going to start in with Gear 1 and talk about marketing, the first gear. And I'd like for you to imagine this gear as part of a bicycle. And we're in first gear. We have one bicycle, a person's pedaling it, and they're cranking out all kinds of things that are going to lead to what would become your leads and ultimately your sales and growth. What are those things this one gear bicycle is doing? Well, it's websites, trade shows, sales collateral, basically the outputs of a lot of execution-oriented activities that lead to efficiency. So that's that one gear. So it's interesting, though, the only way to improve and grow with that one gear is just pedal faster. So you got one person on one bicycle, and they just have to pedal faster. And how many of you, if you think about it, have spent a lot of money in marketing and wondered, why isn't it returning and translating into growth for me? I'm spending the money, but it's not turning into growth. So when we think about it today, a new definition of marketing is really bending the company and its products and services toward the mind of the customer. What's changed? We're in a digital world now. A lot of the activities and the information gathering in the selling cycle are happening online. And suddenly what we say about ourselves and our offering are very critical. So we're going to delve into that a little deeper, but first I'd like to share with you this man who clearly is very proficient in yoga. Sales, basically definition then that we can look at is bending the mind of the customer towards the company and its products and services. Very different vantage point when you look at what marketing's doing and what sales is doing in today's world. So when we think about that definition of marketing, the question becomes, how can you bend your company toward the mind of your customer? How do we make that happen? So looking at marketing sales together, they both make up the growth engine. So when you think about it, marketing provides to sales competitive information, what are the ideal target customers, the insights from the market and the customers, the tools and support, obviously, to be effective in sales. That could be any collateral or event support, messaging, key messaging on website and through the sales collateral, qualified leads, very important. So marketing is giving that to sales. Well, what is sales providing to marketing? Very important loop here. The customer feedback, the market intelligence, the competitive intelligence, that needs to come from sales to marketing to help feed that insights back into the equation that helps us to formulate a strategy. So this is a very important component of the growth engine, thinking about the interactions between marketing and sales functions. When we look at it a little further, we say, well, what is marketing exactly? We've talked about that one gear and all those outputs of marketing, like sales collateral, social media, trade shows, the website. We know about that, and we all kind of think about that when we think of marketing. But what we like to say is all of that execution and those outputs are really the little m of marketing. They're actually the tactical pieces of marketing. The part that is often overlooked is the big M, and that's the strategic components of marketing. And that's where we say the insight is so critical and the strategy that's developed from that insight. And when these elements are in play along with the execution, there you're developing a really good growth engine. So we're going to delve a lot deeper into these areas of insight, strategy, and execution and describe how those impact sales so greatly. I'd like to kind of talk to you about a case study. This is a client that I worked with that had $15 million in revenue in Austin, Texas, a managed IT service company. Kudos to the CEO who had done a great job of basically grassroots building of the company, networking, leveraging his relationships to really grow the company. And we like to say jokingly, basically leveraging a lot of expensive coffee and cheap wine to get out there and talk to people and make things happen from a networking perspective. A lot of companies start out this way and go pretty far. In this case, from 0 to 15 million is very commendable. However, when he stepped back and he said, actually, though, if I look at the pace the industry's growing, I could do better. And he wanted to become a $50 million company, not a 15 million. So the question was, how does he get there? Because he can't scale if he's the one out there building through his own network efforts. So the problem was really that there was unrealized growth overall and that there was really a little M focus. So focused on those outputs from marketing versus the insights and the strategy. So as we sat in a room and did a lot of whiteboard conversations and discovery, we figured out that in reality with this company, there were 3 unique targets and 3 really very different offerings to those targets. And what was happening is within the company, it was being treated as one offering and one target audience. And when you get to a place where you're talking about three different things, but you're speaking to them as one, it means that you really have a vanilla message and you're not articulating clear pain points and value to your unique targets. And in marketing, what we find is the more specific and targeted we get, the better results we get. Why? Because then we're speaking to the actual pain and the problems we're solving, which is what our customers and targets care for, if you think about it. They're interested in, can you solve my problem? So as we got specific with that alignment, the CEO even took it a step further. He said, I want to align on the inside of the company the way I'm aligning externally. And he built 3 divisions within his company that addressed the separate practices. The results were his company was now aligned to the market space he was in and to his specific targets, and he was scaling and growing extremely fast. The approach of getting very targeted and focusing on the insights and strategy yielded a great return for him. So a good question is, who needs marketing? So here we have this, I would say, grumpy looking man saying, I never needed fancy marketing stuff in my day. When I started this company, all I needed was donuts. And what he meant by that was he was very specific about bringing his donuts in and sitting down and having great conversations with prospects or customers. And he always knew that the pink glazed donut was perfect for the receptionist and that the CEO really appreciated a striped donut. He tailored his offering and his discussion to whom he was talking to, and he worked the network and relationships. And we used to refer to this as relationship selling. And it worked. There was a time in our history that this worked very well. So we had in the recent past, marketing would focus on product, price, and positioning, and then throw it over the wall. And then sales would focus on finding the customers, really hunting for that business, presenting the offering, and closing the business. So that was at one point in time. What's changed is that we are very digital now in our world, and there's a lot of automation. And while marketing is still focused on product, price, and positioning, now marketing has the task of nurturing potential leads through a process online and making sure they stick with us so we don't lose their attention, and really taking that prospect through the buyer's journey, oftentimes in a digital sense, and then gaining those prospects so that we can then provide market qualified leads over to sales. Now sales then, their role has changed because now they're focused on processing those leads in a way that they're going through discovery with them, understanding their needs and pain points, serving up the right solution for those pain points, and then bringing that prospect into a decision, buying decision. So the roles have changed quite a bit because of the nature of what technology has done for us and how our buying patterns have changed. When you look at it with the buyer's journey, and I'm primarily speaking to maybe a business-to-business scenario, but this could apply as well to business-to-consumer. The beginning of a buyer's journey is basically awareness that you have a need. And then there's consideration. Well, what should I consider? What are the options open to me? And then there's some kind of decision made, whether to go forward with a purchase or not. Before, when you looked at this scenario, the identification of need was there, but then there was some kind of advertisement or a campaign or a brochure or something that showed up in their mail to where they saw something that, piqued their attention. And they said, well, this is someone maybe I should talk to. They reached out to the company. There was a sales visit. Lots of questions were asked and answered, and then a purchase decision was made. But if you look at it now, the need is identified, then there's an information search online. How many of you, for instance, had needed personally some lawn equipment, maybe a weed eater? And how many of you just go directly to the store and buy that weed eater? Or talk to a salesperson and figure out which one you want? Not so much. Most people now will get online and kind of narrow the selection, and they'll say, well, let me see. I want a weed eater. Let me think about if I want battery or electric. Do I want to be tied to a cord or not? How important are the features? Do I care about warranty? We're thinking about all the things, but we're doing the searching and narrowing down online. Then we're saying, okay, I like these couple of brands. Let me go see what store has them. Then we show up at the store. Pretty much we know the weed eater we want. or we might talk to a salesperson and confirm our choice. But we've done a lot of the research already, and then we're going to purchase. So if you look at it, then what does marketing have to do with this before and now picture? The role of marketing is extended much more into the decision time period. So what I mean by that is because we have so much information gathering and filtering going on digitally, marketing has the role of making sure to keep those prospects warm, keep them sticky on our sites, for instance, our website, make sure they stay in the process so we don't lose them. Because what's happening is sales doesn't even know they exist until farther along in the cycle now. Marketing has to make sure the positioning and messaging resonate and attract that target. So if we look at this a little bit more, the buyer's journey has really changed because of our digital world. There's a certain percentage that's done digitally before a salesperson is involved. If we look at what that is, according to IDC, an average of 65% of the decisions made digitally prior to even touching sales. So the sales team doesn't even know a prospect exists yet until they have already kind of gone 2/3 through their process. Much different world that we live in. So what is the marketing's impact on that? If you think about it, what you're saying in your positioning on your website, for instance, is more critical than ever. Keeping them interested on your website with rich content is more critical than ever. The differentiation that you have amongst your competition is more critical. And then you look at tactical, the execution piece, much, much more complex today. There are many more options out there. Technology adds a lot of complexity. When you look at it, how do you measure what you're spending in marketing, and how do you know you're getting a good return on investment, especially in all the digital aspects and the different channels that we use, from social media to a lot of the even association sites or places we like to be relevant. The other thing that's different today is there's just so many resources out there claiming to be experts. You have your SEO experts, you have your strategy experts, you have people that will be your agency of record. How do you choose, or how do you know how to spend your money wisely and to get the most impact from marketing in this whole buyer's journey in the digital world? And just to add an illustration, this one's interesting from chiefmartech.com. This is the marketing technology landscape. Very mind-boggling, all the different functional areas of marketing and the different tools out there. And what is really critical is to make sure you're right-sized for where you are in your life cycle as a business, and making sure that you don't overkill it with tools that are too difficult and complex for the staff that you have on hand. And also that you choose something that's right-sized, not only from a budget perspective, but feature-wise and size-wise. And there's a lot to navigate here. So another aspect I'd like to go into is running versus growing a company. And when you think about your focus as a CEO or business owner, what is it you're focused on when you're running a company? And what is it that you focus on when you're growing a company? And what I'd like to show you is those are really two very different activities. So when you're running a company, you're focused on the inside four walls. You're saying, let me make sure my sales team is doing the right things, and they're basically have a good check and balance with my finance team. I want to make sure my human resource team, everything is aligned and working the way. The handoffs are good between marketing and sales. I'm really focused on the inside of my four walls when I'm running a company. But for some reason, the best run companies seem to have the hardest time growing. And we think it's because growing a company is really about aligning to the outside of those four walls. And so when you think about growing a company, what's more important is that you know your market, you know the landscape, the dynamics out there, you're very in tune with your competition, you have got a great sense of your customers and their needs and wants and how to expand your customer base. You understand your targets. You know exactly what you're going to go after for growth. And these are the things that make a difference when you're growing a company. So what was interesting, the McCombs School of Business out of University of Texas in Austin did a study not too long ago, and it was of middle market companies, and they expressed the difference between those. They wanted to see who was growing well and who was not, and why. How could they cull out what were the growth factors? So they looked at companies that were less than 200 million in revenue, and they basically only targeted CEO owner for the input into this process. And they looked across 27 different industries, and they wanted to find out why some companies grow really well and why some don't. And what they found was very interesting, because when they looked at the leadership teams of these companies, some of them, and the majority of them, 55%, were operationally focused. And then 45% were found to be market focused. So in the operationally focused companies, and these are the ones that are cost conscious and they're very internally focused, they also found another commonality. Within the leadership teams, they typically came from operation backgrounds, like engineering, operations, sales, whereas the ones who were market focused, which is a more external focus, and they were more growth oriented, they actually came from backgrounds like marketing or IT. So the big question is, what would happen if an operationally focused company started exhibiting market-focused behaviors? Wouldn't they be in a great position to grow? And this, in fact, is the case. So the ones who were operationally excellent, but began to do some more market-focused behaviors actually had a great formula for growth and for running efficiently. So how do we get there? In other words, going from a situation where you have one bicycle, one person, and you need to pedal faster just to get growth, and then just work harder and harder, and that's like pedaling the bike faster and faster. Or do we go and we leverage and use culture and skills of the operationally focused company, but add the market-focused approach and add gears to the bike? So in other words, we have a picture more like this to achieve growth. So one of the things in figuring out how to get there is looking at some warning signs. These are some things I've noticed in companies that don't grow well and seem to be internally focused or operationally focused. Here are some of the warning signs that can help you to understand if maybe this is the case with your company. So delicious looking piece of chocolate cake here. So if your marketing budget is fixed as a % of your sales, there's a good chance that you're more operationally focused. Why do I say that? Well, marketing, if you're really operating in a mode of looking outside of your company, you're looking for opportunities to grow. If you're looking for opportunities to grow, you're going to say, where are they and what would it take to get there? And you're going to be able to make decisions that are more growth oriented versus we can't do this or that in marketing because we're at this % of our sales. So it's a very different way of looking at how you do marketing spend or how you approach the market. The other warning sign is when marketing is actually subordinated to your sales function. When you have this in your company, typically marketing is only operating on the execution level, which means they're only working on the outputs of marketing that we talked about. For instance, sales says, okay, marketing, I have this event coming up. What can you do to help support it and ensure that it's a success? Or, okay, marketing, I have a customer conversation. I need a PowerPoint for this to help support it. So marketing is relegated to a support function of the day-to-day operations of sales, and in no way is operating on an outside-based or external view or strategic level. And when this is the case, you're limiting your growth opportunities. Another warning sign that says you're more operationally focused is when you think that just by talking to your sales or customer support, you're able to get all the external information that you need. So the fallacy in this approach is that if you're only talking to your internal sales and customer support people to get external information, you're limiting yourself to only the prospects or customers that you rub elbows with as a company. You're missing that whole market at large with this approach. And I have found that clients that I work with, and these are CEOs and business owners of small to mid-sized firms, they are absolutely surprised and amazed when we do a formal gathering of external information across customers, partners, vendors they work with. The insights that are revealed are always eye-opening. And you would think that someone who's in their business, running it day to day, year upon year, they would have a good idea of what their customers and partners think. But when you gather the information in a formal way and you put it all together, it is often, I would say 9 times out of 10, amazing and eye-opening to those who see it. So we can't rely on internal employees and staff to tell us what's going on at large with the marketplace. We can glean specific customer feedback, but not get the market at large perspective. So another warning sign is when your website is talking about what you do. What do I mean by that? Because if your website's just telling everyone what you do, you're not really telling them about the problems you solve, and you're not telling your targets about how you can alleviate their pain. You're focused more about all the great things you do. That doesn't help draw the connection to how to solve their problems. When a customer's looking for you, they're just looking for someone that can solve their problems. So you've got to speak in their language, in their terms, in their perspective. So that's the difference between being internally and externally focused when it comes to messaging on your website. Now to the website. I have heard many times someone say, well, we'll get to the website. It's not as important right now. Your website today in this digital world is the most important face to your market. It is the most accessible, and it is literally your top marketing vehicle. And so any CEO or business owner that doesn't think the website's important, that would be a more operationally focused approach. You're not thinking from the outside in, because your website is extremely important in this digital world. So this takes me to another case study I'd like to tell you about. It's a voice over IP provider out of Dallas, Texas, about $5 million in revenue. I engaged with them about a year ago. Their problem was they couldn't figure out how to grow past where they were. Their channel really wasn't producing well, but at the same time, the owners, the 2 founders of the company, millennials, were engineers by trade. They were the ones who built the proprietary product for this voice over IP solution. And so they were very product development focused. Not a problem, and it's always a good thing. A lot of tech companies are started this way. But the issue is they couldn't seem to understand how to get the channel to produce. And this is a case of third-party resellers that are managed IT service companies. And voice over IP is just one trick in their bag, so to speak. They've got a lot of different infrastructure components that they roll out and sell and support, and voice over IP is just one of them. So how do I get their attention? How do I get them motivated? How do I make them sell for me? The solution? We had to really take an outside-in approach. We had to see, I literally interviewed partners of theirs and talked about why they like working with this company or why they don't like working with them, why they choose other companies sometimes when they want to select a voice over IP solution for their customers, and really figure out what was working and not working with that channel, and figure out what the company could do, the provider, to build a program that enticed new channel members, but also developed the current channel members so that they could be successful. The results were, after putting together a 3-pronged strategy of acquisition, development of the channel, and retention of the current channel, was really a doubling of their recruitment efforts and their production from the channel within 6 months. How did we do it? Well, after we gathered the insights and built that strategy, there was a lot of execution around certification programs, updates on the website, a rebranding and positioning of the provider themselves as a provider that offered simplicity. And this was much needed in that industry that's highly fragmented and has small to large players, lots of hidden fees and contracts. So when you give a message of simplicity and you stand behind it with everything you do, it really resonates. And channel members were highly attracted, and they won many awards and accolades since then for being Channel Partner of the Year. And they have an excellent channel program that's been voted on by the channel as a tremendous program for resellers. So very good success there with this VoIP, voice over IP provider. And in a minute, I'm going to tell you about round 2 with them. But for now, let's remind ourselves about these gears. The one of insight, which is the beginning of this process, strategy, and execution, and the 3 gears working in unison to have that growth engine that we talked about humming very successfully. So when we look at synchronizing these gears, this first part we talked about was market insights. And we said, how do we do this? We need to know about our customers, our competitors, and most of all, our own company. Why do we exist? What are we doing here? And this is the knowledge base that you're building that will start to formulate and be able to lead to an effective strategy. So what we need is a clear and compelling purpose and strategy as we're approaching the market. We need to focus our objectives and plans so that we can be successful. One of the things that I like to say to a lot of entrepreneurs I meet that have started very small companies and they're just starting out is your biggest enemy is a lack of focus. Entrepreneurs are wonderful thinkers, they're idea people, they're visionaries, and oftentimes the hardest struggle they have is focusing. They want to cast the widest net possible and be all to everyone, and that does not work from a marketing perspective. So when we want to attract targets, we have to be very specific about what we're providing, how it meets their need, and we have to position ourselves in a way that's attractive to them. So we always want to put the hat on of our targets and offer a very clear and compelling purpose and strategy so that we will resonate with them and be successful in our growth efforts. So lastly, we talk about that execution gear. So now we're talking about being very efficient in carrying out the strategy that's been laid out. So how do we do that? We have to tie everything into the strategy that was created. So what markets are we going after? Specific segments, buyer personas, the offering we have to meet the problems we're solving, and how do we position ourselves relative to our competition? And now let's go execute on that with resources, tactics, and metrics so that we can be very effective in realizing the growth goals that we have. So all these work in unison. We have a book we're giving away today to everyone that's attending called The Growth Gears that I mentioned before. And it's a very basic business book, but when you put it all together, it makes so much sense, and we've seen it work so many times with our clients. And I encourage you, if you're one of these folks like me that have a ton of business books sitting on your nightstand that you haven't gotten to, I encourage you to use this as a reference guide. Pick a topic in the index that resonates with you on where you are with your business today. Go to that section in the book and you will find useful charts, exercises that help you to vet through that particular challenge that you're having right now. You can use this as a reference guide and not have to read it cover to cover. So I encourage you to do so. So let's talk about that fourth very important gear, sales. So sales, as we mentioned, now has a role of, tip of the spear. I mean, discovery, solution, and decision with that prospect. So marketing with all the gears is working very successfully in cranking out market qualified leads. And sales now has the job of further qualifying them to make sure they're sales qualified and actually driving them to that purchase decision. So when all these are working great, it's wonderful, but what tends to happen in companies we've seen is often the gears start to separate. What do we mean by that? Well, it's very easy to fall into this lull of thinking, well, I've already set my strategy. I already gathered insights a year ago, and now we're just cranking away on prospecting and delivering for sales and sales closing business. But what happens when this occurs and you start to separate the gears is you start to get stale in your thinking. You start to get stale on what you understand about your market and your competition. And sales is off doing what they thought was good from a year ago, when in fact your market's changed, your industry has changed, there are dynamics in your competition that have changed. And if you don't keep up with that and keep all these gears churning on a regular basis, you're gonna be operating with a void and in a vacuum. And the execution from your marketing gear is going to become less and less efficient. And you're going to start to find that you're spending more money on marketing, but you're receiving less qualified leads. And that is a big danger signal to say, what's wrong with our strategy? Let's look at our market, our offerings, the competition, our position again. What's going on? Let's go back and gather more insights. And let's make sure we're doing the right things, because we're not yielding the return we expect. So it's very important to keep these gears all churning and operating so that you can be successful in your growth plans. So here we have from Sun Tzu, a very famous Chinese military strategist and general. Strategy without tactics is the slowest route to victory. Tactics without strategy is the noise before defeat. So again, we have to keep all of this working together. So when we talk about building your knowledge gear, your company, customers, competitors, once a year is not enough. It's better if you have a process at least to visit this twice a year. More likely, I'd like to see it done on a quarterly basis, so that along with, let's say you have a quarterly operations review with your leadership team, make sure you're bringing these insights to the table. You're taking a fresh look at what you're doing as a company, why you exist, your customers. You're looking at them and gathering customer feedback. Your competitors, you're making sure you understand new entrants in the market and what's happening with the existing competition that you've been studying. You're understanding dynamics with your partners and your ecosystem. You're really gathering the insights needed to have a very insightful operations review and understand what dynamics have impacted your business in that quarter. Also, as you're looking at this, you're delving into things like what is driving our economic engine, what components of our growth plan are working and what's not, what are the internal and external factors we need to consider, and then let's take a really good look at our customer base and say, what are our most profitable customers and why, and which customers are really not profitable and what's happening there, so that you can adjust your strategy accordingly and make sure that you're doing the right things. So on your customer's perspective too, it's really good to put their hat on and say, what's driving their economic engine? What are they best at? What are they passionate about? From their perspective, how do you fit into their business? And you can never do enough of understanding your customer and understanding why they buy from you. And especially if you can expand that lifetime value, why will they buy more from you? So this was an interesting saying from Theodore Levitt, who's an American economist. He was a Harvard professor as well. People don't want to buy a quarter-inch drill. They want to buy a quarter-inch hole. So if you think about that, yeah, you're trying to get to the hole, but you just have to have a drill to get there. So we have to think in terms of, what do customers really want? What is it they're trying to achieve? And then we understand how to solve that problem and bring to market and bring to bear what they need. So competition, we talked a little bit about competition. So this is where it's really important that you don't just trust your gut or what you're hearing from sales and customer support teams, but you actually do a deep dive analysis on your key competitors and understand what's driving their economic engine. What are they known for? What's their special niche or position? How might I position relative to them so that I stand out? So really understanding what they're up to and figuring out how you can find out. A lot of times your sales team will be a good source for some of this information, because they find themselves in what we call bake-offs, where they're challenged in an RFP process or a process to bid, where they know they're going up against certain competition. Often that prospect might share with that salesperson why they lost the deal or why their competition won it and they stood out. And this is really good information to pass back to the leadership team and to marketing. So here's a question. Would you drive a car blindfolded? Hopefully not. I'm sure we run into a lot of things, and we certainly wouldn't get where we wanted to go. So running your company without insights is like driving with your eyes closed. It's not a good idea. So let's look at strategy then. So strategy, we said, is basically how you become effective. So you've gathered all this knowledge. That's great. You have super amounts of knowledge on all these external factors. But what do you do with it? Well, we've got to build a strategy. So we need to really articulate what our markets are, our offerings, and our position. So when we do that, we say, where have we played thus far? And then where are some potential new markets we could play in? What are our products today, and what's the gap between maybe what our customers are asking for or what prospects are asking for? And then we look at segments and channels of distribution, because sometimes we might find in a particular segment it works better in a reseller model. Or we might find that from a distribution perspective, we can extend our reach much further through a distribution channel. We have to look at all of this and understand what our strategy should be so we can obtain our growth goals. If we look at our offerings, oftentimes through gap analysis with our existing customer base, or really asking prospects through the sales cycle about needs and features, we can figure out what we're lacking in order to meet the market at large need. We also compare our offerings against competitive offerings and can look at a lot of gaps there and decide what's important to our future and our customers and our prospects in order to shore up those gaps. Pricing strategy is very critical. Pricing can make or break your success in the marketplace, and it's very important to understand your competitive pricing and look at how you can set yourself apart with a packaging and pricing approach that is simple and resonates with your target. Positioning, targets, personas, looking at those specific targets, understanding within the target who is my buyer and who is my influencer. I worked with a company recently in Austin, Texas, a technology company that focuses on cloud transformation. It's very interesting because their decision maker or buyer in the process is definitely the business side. So it's the CEO of a company who wants to bring an idea to market but needs experts in technology and specifically in cloud transformations to get there. That really is the buyer. But in that process, depending on the size of the company, you have IT, which is very critical in the decision-making process. Why? I mean, if you're offering a technology solution, certainly if that company has any IT personnel at all, they're going to be asked for their valued input on those decisions. So think about a message that you would give to the CEO of this business versus the message that you would give to an IT influencer. The value that you pronounce is going to be extremely different with those two audiences. And that's why when you're positioning, it's really important to think about the personas in your buying cycle, the influencers and the buyers, and understand the different ways that you express value to them and the different ways you message. This particular positioning can make or break your approach, and it can make a huge difference in how you resonate with people through your website and attract the right targets. So this type of analysis is extremely critical to get the right strategy in place and the right positioning in place. Another big question in regards to your strategy is, where will your growth come from? And as we know, we always want to look at customers along that vertical axis and then product and service along the horizontal and say, well, we've got current product and current customers, but we also have potential for new products and services and new customers. And when you look at it, it's a quadrant map. This map is within the Growth Gears book, and it helps you to lay out your opportunities. And you can look at this particular example and see that in this case, we're manufacturing wine glasses. And we're servicing here maybe a restaurant owner in our current customer base and selling wine glasses. Well, a new offering might be to add wine storage capabilities. So I can offer this wonderful wine storage to that restaurant and give them an opportunity to store more wine. Another thing might be, well, what kinds of businesses might be interested in this upper rack storage for wine glasses? Or would this serve in maybe a large catering or other opportunity? So we look at maybe what are other segments that might be interested in a new offering that we might have. And then taking it a bit further, you could say, well, listen, we manufacture glass vis-a-vis these wine glasses. Why not take our glass manufacturing capability and turn it into an opportunity with a new segment and a new offering with test tubes and beakers for laboratories? Well, now we've broken in with a new offering using our core competency, which is glass making, and we're reaching a brand new segment. So there's a lot of different opportunities and ways to look at how you can grow and the best ways or routes to revenue for you. So when we look at this, and we talked a little bit about positioning earlier, really fleshing out your purpose and positioning is so critical in your digital presence. And what we talked about, how 65% of buying decisions made online, this is critical. So fleshing it out, a process we go through is with what we call a brand house. And you can see the roof of the house there and the big why we matter. Some of you might be familiar with the Simon Sinek TED Talk, which referenced Steve Jobs and his wonderful work on this particular factor here. Why? He really answered the why, didn't he? Steve Jobs had a vision about clean design. And if you think about that, that was the why of Apple. They're all about clean design, and they haven't deviated. So expressing why we matter and why your business exists, what makes you get up in the morning, this is very critical to the overarching brand position. And then the pillars to that would be what we do, why it's relevant to our targets, and then how we're different. So the whole what we do is what people mostly are used to talking about on their websites, but that's just one dynamic or factor that's important here. And the other that are, I think, more critical would be, why is it relevant? It's telling your customers basically how to connect the dots. Not only do we do this wonderful cloud transformation, but the reason why you should care, Mr. CEO or Mrs. CEO, is that this is going to help you to bring your wonderful business idea to life in a cost-effective and scalable way. It's going to bring your minimal viable product to market so that you can go get funding. This is why it's relevant. It's not so much that we do cloud transformation, but it's the fact that it brings this relevancy to you. Now, how are we different? Well, we're different because we actually do things even faster than most cloud transformation experts out there. How do we do that? We have intellectual property that enables us to speed up our process and bring your products to market faster. Well, now that I've expressed how we're different from our competition, but I'm also going to give proof points to each one of these. And that's one thing I want to tell all of you when you're building out your message and what you're going to say about your companies, and you're refreshing that. Make sure you always can prove out what you're saying. Always prove your claims. It can be with customer testimonials. Video ones work well today. We found that audiences will look at video much more and consume video much more than they will written content. I think that's because we're inundated with written content constantly, and we just cannot consume it all. So videos are great ways to get across customer testimonials. Give those proof points. Have your customers help you to share your story. And those help you with proof points along with white papers and thought leadership and blogs that you do to show that you know what you're talking about. So this fleshing out of the purpose and positioning is very critical in this whole strategy. And then, of course, the execution gear, which we talked quite a bit about, which is that those end results, the website, the collateral itself, the sales, messaging, the resources and tactics and metrics fall under this execution gear when you talk about your marketing team and how they're executing against that insight and strategy that have been developed. What we don't want to do is what we call random acts of marketing. And that is driven by, the flavor of the day. Oh, well, I saw this, let's do this. I saw my competitor did this, why don't we do that? Or I think this might be a good event to go to. If it's not grounded in the insights and strategy that you've built, then that's referred to as a random act of marketing. It's not going to lead to the synchronization of those gears and growing your business in the way that you want to or expect to. So when we look at that fourth gear, That's where the tip of the spear, the revenue is generated, and we've got that feedback loop, as we talked about, back into the marketing gears to say, I heard this, I saw this, this is what's happening on my win-loss data. We're losing deals because we don't have the right offering functionality, or we're losing deals because our pricing is too complex. You know, that kind of feedback is very critical to go back into your insights gathering and then bake into your strategy and changing. So it's very important that all of these gears stay extremely fresh and that they work together in unison to drive that growth engine and rev it up. So with that, I just wanted to leave you with a thought. You could actually take some time and maybe grade yourself on the gears for your company and say, how am I doing in the area of insight? Do I really know what my customers want and need? Do I have a good knowledge of my competitors, a fresh knowledge there? Who is my most profitable customer? Who are the ones I'm really not making money on? Should I change my strategy? And then look at your strategy and ask some questions. Do I really know my targets? Have I thought about who the buyer is and who the influencer is in my sales cycle? Execution. Do we really know our growth strategy? Is it embraced? Does everybody in the organization understand what our targets are? Are we operating on that level? Do we have the resources and tactics in place to really support the growth strategies? All of this, if you step back and look at it, you can determine how you're doing in all of these areas and figure out if it's time to refresh or get back to gathering insights and building a strategy that leads to your growth. So I would encourage you to do that, and all of this information can be found in the Growth Gears book, which you will be sent at conclusion of our webinar. And there's also some extra resources on our website at chiefoutsiders.com. Lots of information on Growth Gears to help explain how to use the book to help yourself grow your business. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Dave in case any questions have come in that I can answer for you.
Great. Thank you, Mary. That was a really wonderful structure and very clearly laid out how to think strategically about marketing and driving growth. For anyone who might be listening to this recording and not seeing the associated slides, I will just point out that Mary has posted her phone number as 210-563-8388, so feel free to reach out to her directly there, or Mdoise, which is MDOIZE at chiefoutsiders.com. If you've got some questions, please do access the questions panel and click the little drop-down triangle, type in your question, and we'll jump into them. So first one that came in from Chris, you talked a little bit about market feedback and competitive intelligence, and specifically, Mary said not only through the sales team or the support team. Tell us a little bit about the kinds of processes that you would recommend to get better competitive intelligence, better market feedback.
Okay, great. Very good question, Chris. There's a number of ways to obtain competitive information. Now, one of them is the easiest way, and that is to go to your competitors' websites, look at their positioning, actually have someone put together a matrix that shows you the positioning of your competitors from a customer's viewpoint. You go on the website, you navigate it, you figure out what they say about themselves and how they're positioned. You compare that across your competition and your own positioning, and it can really open your eyes to some differences very quickly. The other thing is do the same process when it comes to their solution set or offering. Do a competitive matrix on just looking at their website just like a customer would, navigating it, figuring out what do they say about their offering, what are they saying about what's great about their offering and what they do best. And figuring out that and laying it out across, say, 4 or 5 key competitors can be eye-opening. You'll see who does a good job of it and who does a very bad job of it. But also, you'll glean some understanding of how you can position yourself to shine and be above your competition in areas of offering or positioning. The other ways are what we call secret shopper, where you can have a third party go in as a customer and actually get pricing information. I don't want to say that in a way that's wrong or anything, but it's general information. So you're calling and you're asking the company for information around their products and services and pricing. And so there's that. There's also, if you're particularly, let's say you're a product company, there's often demos available. You can do searches on demos for their sites, and sometimes people have demos or companies have demos on sites you may not expect because they're software comparison sites or their product comparison sites. And if you just do some Google searches, you're able to locate some of their product demos, which can be very useful from a competitive perspective. So those are just some of the things you can do. There's always looking at public company information through financials, and understanding kind of some things they're saying in their financial reports are always very useful too. And hopefully that helps, Chris, and I'm glad to offer any additional. If you'd like to reach out to me, I can talk to you personally about your particular industry and company and how you might go about a competitive analysis. Hope that helps.
Excellent. I would offer one other thought, Mary, because I spend a lot of my time on this topic as well. Henry Ford once said, if I ask my customers what they want, they say faster horse. But customers are happy to talk to you about their pain and their problems, and that often leads to insights on things that you can do in your business to serve them. So right. When you're not in a selling mode, it's amazing how open people are. What do you think the biggest marketing challenge is for an entrepreneur in today's world? So since we're using the word entrepreneur here, we'll assume it's a smaller, maybe earlier stage company up against maybe larger players in their space.
Okay, yes, that's a really good question, Dave. I think that, and I touched on this during the presentation, what I have found, I've worked with a lot of smaller companies and entrepreneurs, is the lack of focus seems to be a theme. And what I mean by that is you're racing to get revenue, and so you're chasing the latest opportunity, and what ends up happening is it's very hard to gain traction in the market when you're being all things to all people. So I think the biggest challenge for an entrepreneur today is to understand through insights what your strategy should be, and to really hang your hat on that, so to speak, and focus on those targets and solving those problems. And the more you solve problems within a given segment, the more case studies and testimonials you'll have, and the more traction, and how you'll create an environment that makes it easier to gain more customers within that segment. And as I mentioned earlier, marketing is about targeting. So I think the biggest challenge is gaining the insights and focusing the business on the right strategy.
Excellent. I think we have time for one last question, so I'm going to go to something that Glenda has posted. She says, quote, you mentioned aligning each product or service to its corresponding target, and if they are significantly different, we may want to accomplish this through divisions. Can you explain a little bit more about what you were talking about there?
Sure, absolutely. So when we approach the market, and we actually got a vast offering, and we're kind of treating the offering and the market both as one, what happens is our message is confusing, because if I am doing all these things, and in this case, let's give a more clear example, help desk activities for smaller business when they don't have an IT division. So in other words, I'm the helpline. I'm also doing very high-end consulting with Dell as a partner, and implementing Dell equipment in large infrastructures for mid-size or enterprise companies. Or I'm doing high-end consulting to someone who may have an IT department, but they don't have the expertise to do something like a large data center move, or something that involves a lot of changes to their infrastructure. So when you think about all three of those targets I just mentioned and those three offerings, they're all very, very different. So if you were approaching the market and just saying, we're a managed IT service provider, and we serve all kinds of businesses from small to large, and we do all these things, that's not resonating, because I'm not all those things. I'm one of them. I'm either a small business, I'm a medium business, or I'm a large business. I either have an IT department or I don't. I either need a helpline or I don't, or I need high-end consulting or I don't. So what you need to remember with with your marketing is your message has to resonate with the target. So you have to think about each of those targets differently and what their pain points are and give the message that will resonate with them. And that's where not only did they split in 3 practices, but the messaging and the value propositions for each of those was different. So hopefully that helps and gives you a more clear example of what I was alluding to.
That's a great point to wrap up on. So we're up against the top of the hour. Mary, thank you very much for sharing a very practical and valuable approach with the attendees at today's webinar.
Thank you, Dave. I really appreciate it and enjoyed speaking with all of you today.
And folks, remember, you can access this recording and all other past recordings by going to vistage.com/webinars. And we're going to be right back at you next Friday. In fact, I'll be hosting again, more on websites, but from a different angle. Ben Landers is going to talk about your website speed and security might be sabotaging your sales. So should be an interesting one. On behalf of Mary Doise and Chief Outsiders and the entire team at Vistage Worldwide, I'm Dave Nelson. Thank you for joining us today. We'll see you at the next webinar.